Hey, this is Brock Lemires, and in this video, we're going to look at sorting an array. Okay, so what sort means is to put the elements of an array in a particular order, and that can be ascending, descending, alphabetical, whatever, right? But this is a new kind of thing that we're going to do because we're actually going to alter what's in the original array. So this is like we're going to physically copy locations from one index to another. This is actually called a selection sort. There's many types of sorts, but this was like one of the basics. And we learn it because it's a really good exercise to get experience looping through arrays. And when we do this, we're actually going to use multiple loops to access the elements in an array. Okay, so let's start by looking at how we could sort this into ascending order, which means the lowest value is going to be on the left and the highest value will be on the right. And left and right meaning index 0 to index n minus 1. And the way we do this is we start by looking at element or index 0. Okay, so we look at element 0, and what we're going to try to do is say, okay, I am now going to look at the rest of the values in the array. I'm going to compare them to element 0, and if any of them are less, I'm going to go ahead and swap the values. So in this situation, let's start with this array, 1, 7, -2, 5, and 6. We are comparing 1 to each value. So you compare it to 7, 7 is not less. You compare it to -2, -2 is less, so you actually swap the values. Now it's important to swap them because you don't just copy -2 over. 1 isn't going to be deleted from the array. It has to exist in the array. So you actually just move it over and you swap those two. So now you get in the situation where you've swapped the two and then you continue going because you don't know if the other elements are less. So then you compare -2 to 5. 5 is not less. So you say leave it alone. -2 to 6. Not less, and you leave it alone. And now you have guaranteed that element 0 has the least valued number or the lowest value in the array. Okay. Then you move to the next element, element 1, and you do the exact same thing. So in this situation, it's 7. So you compare 7 to 1 and you go, is that less? Is 1 less than 7? And you're like, it is. So swap them and then you continue going. So then you say now is 1 less than 5, or excuse me, is 5 less than 1? No, leave it alone. Is 6 less than 1? Nope, leave it alone. And when you're done with that, you have now guaranteed that the element 1 has the next lowest value. Go to the next element. So this would be, now you're looking at element 2, which happens to hold 7 now, but that's fine. You do the same exact algorithm. So you go through the rest of the array and you say, okay, is 5 less than 7? Holy cow, it is. Swap it. Then you go through the rest of the array. So then you go, okay, is 6 less than 5? No. Leave it alone. After you've done that, you now know that element 2 holds the next smallest number, and you've got 3 of the 5 sorted, and now you go to the next element, and you say, okay, is 6, now you're on this one right here, 7. Is 6 less than 7? Holy cow, it is. Swap them, and then it's like, okay, now the last step is you're done. So you have gone through, and by doing this, you have actually put all of these in an ascending order. Now, you did it. That's a selection sort. Now, when we think about this, we're going to do this with a C program. We are going to use for loops to move through the array. But we actually need 2 for loops. The first for loop is, if you think about it, you're going to need one for loop that tracks the element that you're finding the least value for, the lowest value for. So you'll have one for loop that goes from 1, checks element 0, checks element 1, checks element 2, element 3, element 4, just like you would think. Let's call that J. And we're going to call it J. We've been using I as our loop variable, but I, J, and K are kind of reserved for loop variables. We haven't used J and K before, so let's just use J and K, no reason. Okay, you could use I and J, but let's just use J and K. So I'm going to create a for loop that will go through each element in the array just like normal. Okay, so it's going to start at J is equal to 0, J is less than 5, J plus plus. Okay, so that's easy. But then what we need is a second for loop that's nested underneath this for loop, that for every element you're looking at, it is going to cycle through the rest of the elements. All right. So for example, if J is tracking element 0, you need another one that's going to go, okay, I want to look at element 1, 2, 3, 4. The second for loop is a little different because each time you run it for the element, its range that it goes through, or the number of loops it goes through, actually diminishes. So as an example, let's say that you start off with, you're looking at element 0, which is j is equal to 0, and you're going to look at a for loop, and you would have a for loop that goes from basically element 1 up to 2, 3, 4, so 2 to 4. Well, that's good when you're checking to see what the value that needs to go in element 0 is. But then consider when you move to the next one, the for loop that goes through each element using j that works great, but your next one now is going to shrink. So it no longer goes from element 1, 2, 3, 4. It's going to go from 2, 3, 4. And then the next time you go to this element, it's going to go from 3 and 4. And then the next one's just going to simply do 4. So you actually have the for loop that every time it's called, the initialization in the for loop is actually going to change. Okay. And it's going to basically going to shrink. However, if you think about the way it shrinks, the way it's shrinking is that the starting location of the second for loop is what's changing. The end of it is always the same. You're always going to end on element 4, but it's where you start. So let's think about this. When you have j is equal to 0, you're looking at this element. Where the k for loop is going to start, k is what we're going to use for the second for loop, the loop variable. K is going to start at 1. The next time you go, j is equal to 1, k is going to start at 2. The next time you go, j is going to equal 2, k is going to start at 3. So you notice that really what's happening is k, whenever that loop runs to cycle through the rest of the elements, it's always one more than j. So look at what you can do. You can actually define the initialization for the k for loop by saying j equals 1. So every time it runs, it'll shrink in terms of where it starts and always with a fixed ending point. Okay, so these are the two for loops that we're going to do. All right, you ready? Here's what it'll look like. We're going to have this, actually one more little detail here. So here's what you got to do. You got 1 and 2. Let's look at this first case. You're going to swap 1 and 2. So there's really no swap in C. You can't just say, hey, take these two elements and go and flip them. So what you do when you want to swap two things, you have to actually set up a temporary variable. Okay, so consider that I set up this variable over here called min temp, right? If I wanted to swap this element 0 and element 2, what I'd have to do is I could say, I'm going to go ahead and grab whatever's in element 2 and I'm going to copy it over into my temporary variable. Then what I'll do is I'll copy element 0 over into element 2, but when I do that, element 2 is great. It's got the value it needs, but element 0 is still sitting at its prior value. Then you have to take this temporary and copy it into here. So there's kind of two steps in here. Actually there's three. There's you make a copy of the value you're going to replace. You go ahead and perform the copy, and then you take that temporary and put it back into the original. So that's just a little more nuance of this. All right, you ready? Holy here we go. We're going to sort this thing. All right, so I'm over here on the Linux server. I'm in my home directory, so I'm going to go ahead and change into my mod 08 code along directory, and I'm going to create a new file called array sort. Okay, let me just do this. So I'm going to do array sort. There we go, right there. So I'm going to do vim array underscore sort. And I know this wrap is bothersome, but anyway, so I'm going to do this. I'm in vim, so I'm going to do I to get into insert mode, and I'll say sorting and array. All right. And we're going to go ahead and do pound include. And we're going to bring in the standard IO library because we're going to use printf. Because one of the things I want to do is print like the values that we're looking at each step, because that's going to help us understand where we're at in the loop. Okay, so now I'm going to set up my main function. So int main void, and then open curly, and then come down here and return 0, and then close curly. Save that buddy up, and now here I go. First thing I'm going to do, let's set up an array we're going to sort. So we'll do this example we just had in the slide. So I'm going to say E, it's 5 long, and I'm going to initialize it with 1, 7, -2, 5, and 6. Okay, so we know what that's going to end up being. let's go ahead and set up two loop variables, j and k, and then let's set up our a temporary variable called min temp, and that's what we'll use to store, to basically perform the swap operation that we just talked about. Okay, so here we go. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna print a statement that shows what the array is, okay? And then we'll do it at the end. And this is gonna be kind of cheesy the way I do this, but it's all we can do right now since we don't have what we call strings. Okay, the array starts at, and I'm going to do this, and I'm literally going to put 5 format specifiers on here. So forgive me. I'm going to do this. I want to move this all the way up here. So I'm actually going to go format specifier D, and then format specifier D, format specifier D, format specifier D, format specifier D, and then I'll go ahead and close it, and then I'll do a line return, and then I literally am going to go E0, E1, E2, E3, and E4, and tedious, right? But I'll probably copy and paste that later. At this moment in time, this program should run. So let me compile this and just make sure that I don't have any screwage in here, because I want to make sure that we don't have some silly typo as we go. So I'm in my mod 08 code along, and I'm going to go ahead, since I got room down here, I'm going to go ahead and do GCC, and I'm going to say array underscore sort, and then direct the output executable to array sort underscore sort, and then run it. And if I do wall, it'll probably it'll complain I'm not using it. And it's like, yeah, that's right. I have these variables. I'm not going to print them. But anyway, let's run this thing. So I'm going to do array sort, and look at what happens. It's just going to print back what the thing is. Okay. Had a space in there, so it like freaked. So there it is. It prints, the array starts at that. Okay, so now I'm ready to think about how to do this. All right, here we go. I'm going to create for loop. All right, and I want to let's just go. For j equals 0, j plus plus, not even close, less than 5, j plus plus. Okay, this is my loop that is going to walk through each element in the array. Okay, so that's my first one. Okay, all right, so life is good. Life is good. Now let's go ahead and get some print statements in here. So I'm going to say printf, and I'm going to say let's focus on array element, and then I'll go ahead and print the index of where I'm looking. So this is going to allow me to figure out, like for the J loop, where am I? Okay, and so I do that, and then I'm going to print in there J. So that's all I'm going to do. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to say, just to prepare, if we do a swap, I'm going to do min temp is equal to E at J. If I use it, fine. If I don't, not a big deal, okay? Because right after that, I'm gonna do a for loop, and I'm gonna say K, now this is my loop variable, K is equal to J plus 1. So that's, I'm starting at J plus 1, and I'm gonna allow K to move through this, okay? So think about when you're in this for loop here, the J is not moving. So J will be static at like 0 the first time through, but K will go 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. All right. So boom, boom, boom. Come over here. We're going to do this K is less than 5 because we got to go through the entire rest of the array, and then we'll do K plus plus. All right. So now here's my second loop. Let me bring these curlies up so that I want to bring this up. I'm trying to get it on the screen here so that you can see what's going on. And my curly is wigging out here. Let me see here. Okay, so that's good. Sorry to make you carsick here. I don't know why it's because I don't have enough room here, because I'm trying to show you the end result of the code. Okay, so now here we are. So I'm going to come now over here, and I am now in the second loop. So watch what I do here. I'm going to printf and state where I'm at. So I'm going to say comparing %d to %d, and what I mean by that is I actually want to show what E of k is to min temp. And you go, what's min temp? Well, min temp was the value that I'm looking at up here. Okay, so I could have just said E of j, that would have worked the same. But I did this little interim step right here just because if I need min temp, if I am gonna do a swap, it's already in there waiting for me. Okay, and now here's the logic underneath this. If E of k, this is the rest of the array elements that I'm cycling through, is less than min temp, which is the value that I'm looking at originally to see who is the lowest value, what I am going to do is say this. I'm going to say, we found a new min. So I'm going to say new min found. Swapping, and then I'm going to go boop, boop, and %d. And what I'm going to print there is E of j this time and E of k. Now you're looking at this and you're going, well, isn't E of j the same as min temp? And the answer is yes, it is. I'm just doing it, like I said, I want to show you that it is the same. So that's good. And then if that's true, here comes the swap. Okay, so you ready for the swap? I'm going to say min temp, okay, is going to get the new value, which is E of k. And then I'm going to go E of k gets E of j. And then E of j gets min temp. And you're like, what in the world? Well, let's think about what just happened. Okay. We're going through here. Okay. We're in the for loop. I'm going to drag this now. I'm going to drag this down so you can see the for loop up here. So this kind of, maybe it's hard to see, but here's the for loop. I'm going through each element using j. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4. Okay. So now I come in here. I'm going to go ahead and store off this into min temp just because I can. And I'm going to go through now with my second for loop and go through the next value up till the end. And I'm basically going to say if the value that I'm looking at in the remaining part of the array is less than what I'm looking at here, I'm going to go ahead and say new min, and I'm going to go ahead and update min temp with E of k. That is the new min value. And then I'm going to go ahead and replace E of k with what the original element is that I'm looking at. And then I'll go ahead and update the original element with min temp. So these three statements right here, that was the swap. Okay. Now let's manage our curly brackets here. And then we'll do one last print. Okay. So if I look at this, I'm going to bring this down just a little bit. I come back up here. And there's my for loops, there's my logic. I'm going to grab this right here. I'm going to do an escape YY. And after I get out of all the curly brackets, I'm going to hit the letter P, and that will then print this. And I'm going to say the array. Actually, you know what? I want to put it each time through the for loop. Okay, so I'm going to do YY, and I'm going to do it at each element. So I'm going to do it within the for loop. So, okay, watch. I'm going to try to get this on the screen. Sorry to make you car sick here. Let me get down here. Now that the screen's bigger, the array is now, and then I'll print it. Okay? All right. Well, let's see. So I'm going to move this. Now I'm going to cover the entire code in the slides. And let's go ahead and see what kind of stuff happens now. Well, it compiled. Now let's see if it runs. Oh, holy moly. Let's see what we got. Okay, so I come up here. I'm going to bring this all the way up. I want to see the entire thing go. So let me clear that and run it again. That's still not enough room. So now let's go. I'm going to bring that up even further and run it. And still not enough room. I'm going to bring it up over there. Holy cow, this is big. Let me clear that. And I'll go array 0. Okay, here we go. The array starts at 1, 7, negative 2, 5, 6. Let's focus on array element 0. Okay, so this is this value right here. So comparing 7 to 1, and it's like, okay, comparing, it was not less. Comparing negative 2 to 1, holy moly, new min found, swapping 1 and negative 2. Now, notice that you're comparing element 0, but now element 0 has negative 2 in it. So you say comparing 5 to negative 2, comparing 6 to negative 2. Now the array is this. Negative 2, 7, 1, 5, 6. We swapped 1 and negative 2. Isn't that awesome? And now you move to the next one. Let's focus on array element 1. So you compare, you're going to compare, notice that you're right here. So you're comparing 7 to 1 Is 1 less? It is. Swap it. So then you swap it. So now you're comparing 1, which is in element 1. You're going to compare that to the next value. So 1 to 5 and 1 to 6, and there was no swap. So now look at the array now. You have -2 and 1, and now you've got the first two locations done. So now you focus on element 2, which is this value right here, 7. So you go, is 5 less than 7? Holy cow, it is. So you swap them, and now you've got 5 in the element 2, which you're looking at. So you go, okay, is 5 less, or is 6 less than 5? Nope, you're done. Now you're at -2, 1, 5, 7, 6. So you're almost at the end. So you're going to say, here's element 3, and you go, is 6 less than 7? It's like, it is. Swap them. So you swap it, and then you're done. So here's the final array: -2, 1, 5, 6, 7. You have now sorted an array using a selection sort algorithm, and it actually worked. But the key to it all was this whole idea of using nested for loops in order to access the array in different ways. But that is it. You did it. Got a little practice with for loops and accessing arrays. Life is good, and see ya.